By accident, a Russian guy came upon a tiny abandoned dog and chose to bring it home to look after. To his surprise, the little canine grew at an astonishing rate, quickly surpassing the size of all the other dogs in just a few months. It turns out the pup he rescued was not a dog. How can he find the dog and what the pup actually is? Follow today's story on Animal Needs Love to find out more. On a chilly winter morning, Audrey Musienko awoke to the crisp silence of Siberian wilderness, eager to clear his mind with a gentle stroll through the forest. The air was biting, but the walk would bring warmth without the strain of a hard hike. He pulled on his thickest coat, wrapped a scarf around his neck, and slipped his hands into warm gloves, ready for the cold. The forest lay just beyond his backyard, a sprawl of tall pines and frosted underbrush, blanketed in white and stretching out for miles. It was Audrey's retreat, a place he'd come to know as well as his own home. Crunching through the snow-covered path, Audrey breathed in the fresh air, his steps muffled by the thick layer beneath him. But suddenly, a faint, fragile sound broke the stillness. He stopped, heart quickening, and strained his ears. It was unmistakably a cry, small, helpless, and urgent. Curiosity and worry drove him to follow the sound deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows darker. And there, huddled against a gnarled tree trunk, he spotted a small bundle of fur, barely visible against the snow. His breath caught as he realized it was a puppy, tiny and trembling, its eyes still shut. The pup looked as if it were no more than a few weeks old, far too young to be alone, especially in the freezing woods. Audrey's heart twisted. He couldn't fathom how anyone could leave such a defenseless creature to fend for itself in the cold. Without hesitation, he knelt down, arms outstretched, and scooped up the little pup. Its frail body was ice cold through his gloves, and it shivered in his hands, drawing closer to the warmth of his chest. Cradling the puppy close, Audrey turned back, quickening his pace as he made his way home. As he crossed the threshold into the warmth of his cabin, he knew he would do everything he could to give this fragile little soul a second chance at life. Once inside, Audrey quickly settled the puppy onto a soft, old blanket he'd pulled from a cupboard, bundling the little one snugly. The pup barely stirred, its tiny breaths shallow and strained. Audrey's heart ached as he stroked the puppy's back, hoping his touch would somehow ease its trembling. He knew he needed to do more though, so he rushed to heat a hot water bottle, wrapping it in a towel to create a gentle source of warmth. Placing it next to the puppy, he watched as the little creature instinctively nestled closer to the warmth, its shivering gradually lessening. Still, Audrey was worried. He didn't know how long the pup had been out in the cold or what other care it might need. The image of those tiny closed eyes and fragile frame gnawed at him, so he called his closest friend, Dima, who happened to be a vet in the nearest town. Dima, I found a pup in the forest. I think it was abandoned. It's freezing, barely breathing, Audrey explained urgently. I'll be there as soon as I can, Dima assured him. While he waited, Audrey sat by the puppy, gently rubbing its fur and murmuring words of comfort. In time, he felt the little body start to warm up, and faint breaths grew a bit steadier. When Dima finally arrived, he brought a bag full of medical supplies and a calm, steady presence that reassured Audrey. Dima worked carefully, checking the pup over from head to tail. She's weak and a bit dehydrated, but you got her just in time, he said, administering fluids and showing Audrey how to properly bottle feed her a warm milk formula. Over the following days, Audrey took Dima's advice to heart, feeding the pup every few hours, keeping her warm and ensuring she rested. The puppy, whom he'd started calling Leuba, a name meaning love, seemed to recognize his voice and even started to lift her tiny head when he entered the room. Her eyes opened for the first time, revealing dark, trusting orbs that watched him with a flicker of curiosity. As the days turned into weeks, Audrey and Leuba settled into a steady rhythm together. Each morning, Audrey would wake to find Leuba curled up beside him, her little body nestled close for warmth and comfort. She'd lift her head, tail thumping against the blankets, and greet him with a happy yip. Audrey found himself laughing more than he had in years. There was a lightness to his days now, a sense of joy he hadn't expected. Their daily routine revolved around the forest and the small world Audrey had built around his cabin. Leuba loved exploring, bounding over snowdrifts and sniffing every fallen branch and hidden burrow. At first, she would dart off with boundless curiosity, but as she grew, Leuba grew more protective, always glancing back to make sure Audrey was close behind. As the months passed, Audrey began to notice something remarkable. Leuba was no ordinary dog. She was growing fast, much faster than other puppies he'd seen. Her legs lengthened, her shoulders broadened, and her once small paws grew to match her powerful frame. By the time spring melted the last of the snow, Leuba had outgrown the lap-sized blanket Audrey had first wrapped her in, and by summer she was towering over most dogs they encountered on their rare visits to town. People stopped to stare when they saw her. Leuba had become a striking figure, with a thick, sleek coat and a gaze as deep and watchful as the Siberian woods she'd come from. Some guessed she might have wolf blood, though Audrey only chuckled and told them she was just his forest dog, a one-of-a-kind soul who'd chosen him as her family. Daily life with Leuba was filled with adventure and companionship. She loved their long hikes, and Audrey often brought her along when he went to gather wood or check on the fences. One evening, as they sat under the stars, Audrey ran his hand through her thick fur and spoke to her, as he often did. "You're not the little pup I found, are you, Leuba?" he murmured, with a smile, gazing into her dark, intelligent eyes. Leuba responded with a low rumble, pressing her head closer to his hand, as if to say, "I'm still yours, no matter how big I get." The answer came quicker than he thought. One chilly evening, Audrey was in town gathering supplies when he ran into Dima, the vet who had helped him with Leuba as a pup. They sat together at the town's small cafe, catching up. Audrey mentioned Leuba's size, her wild energy, and how she seemed more like a creature of the forest than a typical dog. Dima gave him a serious look. "Have you ever thought she might be more than just a dog?" Dima asked. "What do you mean?" Audrey replied, "Oui and so," though he felt a hint of worry in his chest. "Leuba might be part wolf, or even entirely wolf," Dima said gently. "Her size, her instincts. You've raised her well, Audrey, but she might have a wild heritage." The thought hit Audrey hard. Leuba was like family, but if she was truly a wolf, things were complicated. Raising a wolf in Russia wasn't straightforward. Raising wild animals like Leuba required special permits and certifications. The laws in Russia aimed to protect both the animals and the people around them, ensuring that such creatures were cared for properly in environments that matched their natural needs. Without these, there was a risk that Leuba could be taken away from him, something Audrey couldn't bear to even think about. He quickly dove into researching the regulations for registering as an animal rescue expert in Russia. Proving he had the right facilities and knowledge to care for a wild animal was challenging, with many obstacles making it seem nearly impossible. But Audrey was determined. Leuba was more than just an animal, he was family. The thought of losing him to a shelter was heart-wrenching. Audrey knew it would devastate both of them, as Leuba had never known life without him. In the following weeks, Audrey invested all his energy and resources into preparing for the inspection that would determine if he could keep Leuba. He built a proper enclosure to ensure their safety and prove he could provide for Leuba's needs. Simultaneously, he began sharing their story online, posting videos of Leuba as a puppy and showcasing their deepening bond. The story went viral, captivating viewers with their unique relationship. Unfortunately, the inspector who came to evaluate the property wasn't entirely convinced. Despite Audrey's best efforts, the enclosure didn't meet all the standards, and the inspector warned him that he had only a few weeks to make the necessary adjustments, or Leuba would be taken away. It was a crushing blow. The inspector understood the deep connection between Audrey and Leuba, and he could see how much effort Audrey had put in, but he had no choice but to follow the rules. The bond they shared was strong, but in the eyes of the law, it wasn't enough to secure Leuba's future. Audrey was devastated. He had already spent all his savings on the property and the enclosure. He was still working his day job in the city, but the money wasn't enough to cover the costs of the upgrades required. Faced with the reality that he might have to give up the wolf he loved like a child, Audrey started distancing himself from Leuba. He thought that maybe if he broke the bond slowly, it would hurt less when the inevitable came. But it didn't work. It only made things worse. Leuba grew depressed, and Audrey felt like his heart was breaking every day. But then, something incredible happened. One of Audrey's friends, moved by his situation, shared his story online, and people from all over the world rallied to help. Within days, Audrey had received enough donations to make the necessary changes to his property. It was a miracle. Even the inspector, who had once warned Audrey of the dire consequences, had contributed to the cause. When the inspector returned for the final inspection, everything was up to code. Audrey had done it. He had saved Leuba's life and kept his family together. With the paperwork in place, Audrey was able to breathe a sigh of relief. He could focus on giving Leuba the life he deserved. It wasn't just about building an enclosure anymore. It was about making a home for a wolf, about ensuring he had everything he needed to live comfortably while staying true to his wild nature. Audrey's efforts didn't stop there, though. His experience inspired him to expand his work with animals, to open his home and his heart to other creatures in need. Whether it was wolves, wild boars, or other animals in distress, Audrey knew his true calling was to give them a chance at life in the safest, most loving environment possible. As for Leuba, he thrived in the sanctuary Audrey had built for him, with plenty of room to run and play, as well as the unconditional love of the man who had saved him. The wolf may never live in the wild again, but with Audrey by his side, he would always have a home where he could be himself. Thank you for joining us in this heartfelt journey. How do you feel about the bond between Audrey and Leuba? Do you think the decision to adopt a wild animal like Leuba is the right choice? Would you do the same in Audrey's shoes? If you find this story interesting, please give it a big thumbs up and share it with others. Finally, don't forget to turn on our bell and subscribe to our channel Animal Needs Love so you don't miss any of our new videos. Thank you for your support, and see you next time.